The crystal wine glass caught the light as Miriam set it down on the white tablecloth. Her hands were steady. They had learned to be steady over 6 months of practice. 6 months of swallowing words that burned her throat like acid. Harrison Drake looked up from his conversation with 3 business associates, his silver hair perfectly styled, his charcoal suit worth more than 3 months of her rent. He switched from English to French without missing a beat, his eyes finding hers with that familiar cold amusement. Regardez-la, elle attend comme un chien qui aspire de reste. Look at her. She waits like a dog, hoping for scraps. His associates laughed. One of them, a younger man with a nervous smile, glanced at Miriam and quickly looked away. Jamie demande si elle comprend, inserti chuamoti. Probablement pas. Si es gens enointi jamais rain apristi udil. I wonder if she understands even a single word. Probably not. These people never learned anything useful. Miriam stood perfectly still. The dining room hummed around them, other guests enjoying their meals, unaware of what was happening at table 12. The chandeliers cast warm light across the cream-colored walls of the gilded room. Everything looked elegant. Everything looked civilized. Harrison continued, his French flowing easily from years spent in Monaco. Tu sais aussi qu'est vraiment pathétique? Elle pense probablement KSI elle says, on Louis les sera un bon pourboire. Comme SI large and private actor de la dignite. You know what's truly pathetic? She probably thinks if she smiles enough, we'll leave her a good tip, as if money could buy dignity. Something shifted in Miriam's chest. A door that had been locked for 6 months began to crack open. She had absorbed his cruelty twice a week for half a year. She had smiled through insults about her intelligence, her worth, her existence. She had collected his pathetic tips and used them to buy her father's medication. She had buried every cutting word in a place so deep she sometimes forgot she could still feel them. But tonight, standing in that golden light, while Harrison Drake performed his cruelty for an audience, something inside her simply refused to stay buried any longer. Miriam opened her mouth, and everything changed. But to understand what happened next, you need to understand how she ended up here in the first place. How a woman with nearly completed PhD from Yale University found herself serving tables to a man who assumed she could not understand him. This story starts 6 months earlier, on a gray February morning, when Miriam Wells walked the back entrance of the Gilded Room for the very first time. 6 months earlier, the service entrance was down a narrow alley off Newberry Street, past dumpsters that smelled of yesterday's discarded cuisine. Miriam found the door propped open with a milk crate. Inside, the hallway was plain white tile, nothing like the elegance she had glimpsed through front windows. A woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and reading glasses perched on her nose looked up from a clipboard. This was Margaret Brennan, wife of the owner, and the person responsible for hiring all front-of-house staff. Miriam Wells? Yes, ma'am. Margaret studied her resume, then studied Miriam's face with equal scrutiny. Yale University. PhD candidate in comparative literature. Fluent in French, Italian, and Spanish. She looked up. Why are you applying to wait tables? Miriam had prepared for this question. She had practiced the answer until it sounded natural, until the pain underneath it became invisible. Family circumstances. I need flexible hours and immediate income. I've worked in restaurants before, during my undergraduate years. I know the work. You're overqualified. I'm motivated. Margaret removed her glasses and tapped them against the resume. The girls who come through here with fancy degrees usually last about 3 weeks. They think the work is beneath them. They get frustrated. They leave. I won't leave. How can you be sure? Miriam thought her father, sitting in their small apartment in Dorchester, his hands trembling as he tried to hold a coffee cup. She thought of the stack of medical bills on the kitchen counter, growing taller every week. She thought of the phone call from the insurance company, the one that had ended with the words, "Coverage denied." "Because I can't afford to leave," Miriam said. "I need this job. Whatever it takes, however long it takes, I will do this job well." Something in Margaret's expression softened, just slightly. "Training starts Monday. Be here at 9. Wear black pants and comfortable shoes. We'll provide the rest." The Gilded Room occupied the ground floor of a historic brownstone that had been converted into Boston's most exclusive dining destination. The main room seated 60 guests at white-clothed tables beneath 3 antique chandeliers imported from a French chateau. The walls were painted a soft cream, adorned with original oil paintings that were probably worth more than everything Miriam had ever owned combined. During her first week, Miriam learned the rhythm of the restaurant. Lunch service began at 11:30 and ran until 2. Dinner service started at 5 and often stretched past midnight. The kitchen was run by Chef Daniel Okonkwo, a Nigerian-born culinary master who had trained in Paris and spoke with a quiet authority that made everyone listen when he talked. The servers were a mix of aspiring actors, graduate students funding their degrees, and lifers who had turned waiting tables into something approaching an art form. Sophia Reyes fell into the last category. She was 41 years old, had worked at the Gilded Room for 12 years, and knew every regular customer by name, preference, and peculiarity. Table 12, Sophia said during Miriam's second week, nodding toward the corner booth. That's Harrison Drake's table. He comes every Tuesday and Friday at 7. Orders the same thing every time. Dover sole, roasted vegetables, a bottle of the Montrachet, never varies. Miriam looked across the dining room at the man in question. He was alone that evening, reading something on his phone while sipping white wine. Even from a distance, she could sense something cold about him, something that made the air around his table feel different. What should I know about him? Sophia hesitated. He tips exactly 15%. Not a penny more, not a penny less. He's polite to management, less polite to staff. She paused. He speaks French sometimes. To himself, mostly, or on the phone. That's it. That's all you need to know for now. Miriam did not serve Harrison Drake that night. She watched from across the room as Sophia attended to him with practiced efficiency, her smile professional but her eyes guarded. When he left, Sophia came to the service station and let out a long breath. "Good night." "Fine," Sophia said, but she did not elaborate. 3 days later, on a Friday evening, Margaret assigned Miriam to the corner section. Table 12 was included in her rotation. Harrison Drake arrived at exactly 7 o'clock, as Sophia had predicted. He wore a navy suit and a silver watch that caught the light when he moved his wrist. His hair was gray but thick, swept back from a face that might have been handsome once, but had hardened into something colder. He was accompanied by 2 other men, both younger, both deferential. Miriam approached with water glasses and menus. "Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome to the Gilded Room. May I start you with something to drink?" Harrison did not look at her. He continued speaking to his companions about some deal involving property development in the Seaport District. One of the men glanced at Miriam apologetically. "The Montrachet," Harrison said, still not making eye contact. "A bottle, and make sure it's properly chilled this time." "Of course, sir." She brought the wine. She took their orders. She delivered their food and refilled their water glasses and cleared their plates when they finished. Throughout the meal, Harrison barely acknowledged her existence. She was furniture, functional but uninteresting. It was only as she was bringing the check that Harrison finally looked directly at her. "Your accent," he said. "Boston?" "Yes, sir. Born and raised." He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Funny. You carry yourself like you think you belong somewhere else." Miriam did not know how to respond to that. She simply placed a check on the table and thanked them for dining at the Gilded Room. As she walked away, she heard Harrison say something in French to his companions. She understood every word, but she pretended not to hear. "Elle quoque chose. Cela, Jamie demand combien de temps ca Louis prendre pour cracker." She has something, that one. I wonder how long it will take her to crack. That night, Miriam rode the bus home through streets slick with February rain. The city lights blurred past the window, and she thought about the life she had left behind. The life that now felt like it belonged to someone else entirely. 15 months ago, Miriam Wells had been on track to become Dr. Miriam Wells. Her office at Yale was small, but filled with books. French literature lined one wall. Italian poetry lined another. Her dissertation, an analysis of exile and belonging in 19th century French Romantic literature, had been praised by her committee as ambitious and original. She was 26 pages from completion. Her mentor, Professor Helena Carstairs, had already begun making inquiries about faculty positions. "You have a future in this field," Helena had told her over coffee in the department lounge. "A real future. Don't let anything distract you from finishing." Miriam had not planned to let anything distract her, but plans, she had learned, were fragile things. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon in November. She was in the library, surrounded by books, working through a particularly difficult passage of Chateaubriand, when her phone buzzed with her father's number. Except it was not her father calling. It was his neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, an elderly woman who lived in the apartment next door. "Miriam, I think you need to come home. Your father fell this morning. He's in the hospital. They're saying it might be serious." The flight from New Haven to Boston took an hour. The cab from Logan to Massachusetts General took another 40 minutes through traffic. By the time Miriam reached her father's bedside, the doctors had already delivered the diagnosis: Parkinson's disease, progressive, incurable. Walter Wells had been a high school English teacher for 34 years. He had introduced thousands of teenagers to Shakespeare and Fitzgerald and Morrison. He had raised Miriam alone after her mother died of breast cancer when Miriam was 9. He had worked double shifts to save money for her college fund. He had driven her to New Haven himself when she started at Yale, helping her carry boxes up 3 flights of stairs to her tiny graduate student apartment. Now he lay in a hospital bed, his hands trembling against the white sheets, his eyes struggling to focus on her face. "Hey, sweetheart," he said, his voice weaker than she had ever heard it. "Sorry to worry you." "Don't apologize, Dad. I'm here now. Everything's going to be okay." But everything was not going to be okay. The doctors explained the progression of the disease. The tremors would worsen. Motor function would decline. Eventually, he would need full-time care. And care was expensive. Walter had health insurance through his teacher's pension, but it covered only a fraction of what he needed. The medications alone cost over $2,000 a month. Physical therapy was extra. Occupational therapy was extra. The adaptive equipment he would eventually need, the wheelchair and the hospital bed, and the specialized utensils, none of it was covered. Miriam spent 3 days in Boston, sleeping on the couch in her father's apartment, and making phone calls to insurance companies, to Medicare, to anyone who might help. The answers were always the same: insufficient coverage, denied, waiting list. On the 4th day, she called Professor Carstairs. "Helena, I need to take a leave of absence." The silence on the other end of the line was heavy. "Miriam, you're so close. 26 pages. You could finish in a month." "I know, but my father needs me. I have to go home." "Can't you work remotely? Finish the dissertation while you're there?" Miriam looked around her father's apartment. The kitchen table was covered with medical paperwork. The refrigerator was nearly empty. Her father was asleep in the bedroom, exhausted from a physical therapy session that had lasted only 20 minutes before he could not continue. "I don't think so. Not right now. Maybe in a few months, when things stabilize." Helena sighed. "I'll file the paperwork. You have up to 2 years before the leave becomes permanent. But Miriam, don't let this derail everything you've worked for. Your dissertation matters." "My father matters more," Miriam thought, but did not say. She withdrew from Yale 3 days later. She packed up her office, boxing the books she could not bear to sell and donating the rest. She said goodbye to colleagues who did not understand her decision, and to friends who promised to stay in touch but probably would not. Then she went home. For the first month, she tried to maintain hope. She applied for jobs in her field, positions at universities and research institutions and publishing houses. She sent out dozens of applications and received dozens of rejections. Everyone wanted a completed degree. Everyone wanted publications she had not yet finished. Everyone wanted someone who was not responsible for a sick parent in another city. The savings ran out in February. The credit cards reached their limits in March. By April, Miriam had sold most of her books, her nice clothes, even the pearl earrings that had belonged to her mother. And still the bills kept coming. That was when she saw the job posting for the Gilded Room. Server wanted. Experience preferred. Immediate start. She applied the same day. 2 weeks later, she was wearing a black uniform and carrying plates of food worth more than she earned in a shift. Her dissertation sat unopened on her laptop. Page 247. 26 pages from completion. It might as well have been 1,000 miles away. The pattern began in March. Harrison Drake came to the Gilded Room twice a week, every week, without fail, and somewhere along the way, he began requesting Miriam's section specifically. At first, she did not understand why. She was competent but not exceptional. She was pleasant but not memorable. There was nothing about her service that should have made her stand out. Then the French started. It happened on a Tuesday evening, 3 weeks after their first encounter. Harrison was alone that night, reading documents on his tablet while he ate. Miriam approached to refill his water glass. Encore en any sate rain faire d'autre que verser de l'eau, he murmured without looking up. Another one who cannot do anything except pour water. Miriam's hand froze for just a moment before she continued pouring. She understood perfectly. She had spent 2 years studying in Paris during her undergraduate degree. She had written papers in French, delivered presentations in French, argued with professors in French. But Harrison did not know that, and something in his tone, something satisfied and cruel, told her that he assumed she could not possibly understand him. She said nothing. She finished pouring the water and moved on to her next table. That should have been the end of it, but Harrison had noticed her hesitation, that brief freeze. And the following Friday, he brought 2 associates and made Miriam the centerpiece of his entertainment. Elle est different de autres, he told his companions as Miriam approached with menus. She is different from the others. Plus calm, plus contrôlée. Jamie demande si que se cache derrière si masque. More calm, more controlled. I wonder what is hiding behind that mask. Throughout the meal, Harrison's French commentary continued. He speculated about her education, concluding she probably had not finished high school. He wondered aloud whether she lived in some terrible part of the city, surrounded by people as worthless as herself. He made jokes about her appearance, her intelligence, her very existence. His associates laughed. Miriam served their food with steady hands and a neutral expression. When she returned to the kitchen after they left, Sophia was waiting. You okay? You look pale. I'm fine. That Drake guy, he was talking a lot tonight, in French. Miriam busied herself with sorting checks. I didn't notice. Sophia studied her for a long moment. Right. Well, if you ever need to talk, I'm here. But Miriam did not talk. She could not afford to talk. If she complained, if she made waves, she might lose a job. And losing the job meant losing the income. And losing the income meant losing her father. So she stayed silent. Week after week, she absorbed Harrison's cruelty, like a sponge absorbing poison. She smiled when he called her stupid. She nodded politely when he suggested she was worthless. She collected his 15% tip and used it to buy groceries, to pay for her father's medication, to keep the lights on in their small apartment. The French words accumulated inside her like stones. Some nights, lying awake in her narrow bed, she could feel the weight of them pressing against her chest. He called her invisible. He called her insignificant. He called her a reminder of everything he had escaped when he built his fortune. And slowly, despite knowing better, despite all her education and intelligence and self-awareness, Miriam began to wonder if maybe he was right. Have you ever hidden a part of yourself just to survive? Have you ever let someone else define your worth because the cost of fighting back felt too high? Miriam's story is only beginning. If you want to see what happens next, subscribe to The Timeless Tale and hit the notification bell so you do not miss a moment. The apartment in Dorchester was on the 3rd floor of a converted triple-decker that had seen better days. The stairs creaked under Miriam's feet every night when she came home. The hallways smelled of whatever the neighbors were cooking, usually something with onions, sometimes something with curry. The walls were thin enough that she could hear televisions playing through them, laugh tracks and news anchors and late-night movies blending into a constant low murmur. But inside their apartment there was quiet. There was peace. Walter Wells sat in his armchair by the window most days, watching the street below. His hands trembled constantly now, a fine vibration that made simple tasks difficult. Buttoning a shirt took 10 minutes. Holding a fork required concentration. Writing, the activity he had once loved most, had become nearly impossible. The evening after Harrison's first French assault, Miriam came home to find her father asleep in his chair, a book lay open on his lap, its pages unturned for what looked like hours. She stood in the doorway for a moment, watching him breathe, seeing how much thinner he'd become, how much older. She covered him with a blanket and went to the kitchen to start dinner. "You're home late," Walter said from behind her, his voice groggy with sleep. "Busy night at the restaurant." She did not turn around. "Are you hungry? I was going to make pasta." "You should eat. I had a sandwich earlier." "Dad, you need more than a sandwich." He shuffled into the kitchen, his footsteps uncertain. She heard the chair scrape against the floor as he sat down at the small table. "How was work?" "Fine." "You always say fine. You never say what it's really like." Miriam stirred the sauce, watching the tomatoes bubble. "It's work, Dad. It pays the bills. That's what matters." Walter was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. "I saw your laptop today. That file, your dissertation." Her stirring slowed. "You haven't opened it in weeks." "I check sometimes, when you're at work. The last modification date never changes." "I've been busy." "Miriam," his voice cracked slightly, "you gave up everything to come back here. Your degree, your career, your life, for me." She turned off the stove and finally faced him. Her father sat hunched at the kitchen table, his trembling hands folded in his lap, his eyes wet with tears he was trying not to shed. "I didn't give up anything," she said firmly. "I made a choice. There's a difference." "Is there?" She sat down across from him, taking his shaking hands in her steady ones. "Dad, listen to me. You spent your entire life taking care of me. After Mom died, you could have fallen apart. You could have given up. But you didn't. You got up every morning and made me breakfast and drove me to school and helped me with my homework and told me I could be anything I wanted. That's what parents do." "No, that's what good parents do. That's what you did. And now it's my turn." Walter pulled his hands away gently, wiping his eyes with his sleeve. "I never wanted this for you. I wanted you to have everything. The degree, the career, the life you dreamed about. I'll get there eventually, when things settle down." "Things never settle down, sweetheart. There's always something. I learned that the hard way when your mother got sick." Miriam did not know what to say. She returned to the stove and finished making dinner in silence. They ate together at the small table, the television playing quietly in the next room. Walter talked about a book he was reading, a biography of Lincoln that was taking him forever because his hands could not hold it steady. Miriam talked about the restaurant, carefully editing out anything about Harrison Drake. Afterward, she helped her father get ready for bed. The routine was practiced by now. Medication at 9 o'clock. Help with buttons and zippers. Make sure the path to the bathroom was clear of obstacles. "I love you, Dad," she said as she turned off his bedroom light. "I love you too, sweetheart. More than you know." Alone in her own room, Miriam opened her laptop and stared at the dissertation file. The cursor blinked at the end of page 247. 26 pages from completion. A lifetime away. She closed the laptop without typing a word. In April, Harrison brought guests to every meal. Sometimes they were business associates, men and women in expensive suits discussing deals worth more than Miriam would earn in a dozen lifetimes. Sometimes they were socialites, elegant women who looked through the staff like they were made of glass. Once, he brought a woman who appeared to be his girlfriend, a brittle blonde in designer clothes who laughed at all his jokes and ignored the cruelty in his eyes. Always, Miriam was the entertainment. "Regardez-la," Harrison said one Friday evening, gesturing at Miriam as she approached with appetizers. "Look at her. Tellement impassible. Tellement professionnel. Jamie demande si elle reste quoi que ce soit. So impassive. So professional. I wonder if she feels anything at all." His guests, two men who worked at his hedge fund, exchanged uncomfortable glances but said nothing. "Probablement pas," Harrison continued. "Probably not. Les gens comme elles sont faites pour servir." Pa poor penser. Pa poor center. Just poor server. People like her are made to serve, not to think, not to feel, just to serve. Miriam set down the plates with perfect precision. Is there anything else I can get you? Harrison smiled his cold smile. Votre français est inexistent, n'est-ce pas? Your French is non-existent, isn't it? Bien sûr que oui. Pourquoi quelqu'un comme vous parlerait-il en autre langue? Of course it is. Why would someone like you speak another language? No, sir, Miriam said. That will be all. She walked away before she could hear his response. But she knew he was still talking about her, still dissecting her, still using her as proof of his own superiority. In the service corridor, she leaned against the wall and closed her eyes. Hey! Sophia's voice was gentle. You need a minute? I'm fine. You keep saying that. But you're not fine. Anyone can see it. Miriam opened her eyes. Sophia stood a few feet away, her tray balanced on one hip, her expression concerned. That guy at table 12, Sophia said, he does something to you. I've watched it happen for weeks. You go to his table and something in you just shuts down. It's nothing. It's not nothing. I've worked here for 12 years. I've seen how people treat servers. But this is different. He's targeting you specifically. Sophia paused. What does he say? In French, Miriam's throat tightened. Nothing important. Miriam, it doesn't matter what he says. What matters is that I keep this job. What matters is that I can pay my father's medical bills. What matters is survival. Sophia studied her for a long moment. Survival is important, but so are you. Don't forget that. She turned and went back to the dining room, leaving Miriam alone in the corridor with Harrison's words echoing in her head. Made to serve, not to think, not to feel. That night on the bus, Miriam tried to remember the last time someone had treated her like an intellectual equal, the last time someone had asked her opinion about something that mattered, the last time she had felt like the person she used to be. She could not remember. The worst night came in early May. Harrison arrived with 4 associates, all men, all eager to impress him. The energy at the table was different from the start, louder, more aggressive. Harrison had clearly had a good day, closed a major deal or crushed a competitor, and he was in the mood to celebrate. Miriam approached with water and menus. Before she could speak, Harrison launched into French. Ce soir, messieurs, je vais vous montrer quelque chose d'amusant. Tonight, gentlemen, I'm going to show you something amusing. Notre service. Regardez-la, elle n'a aucune idée de ce que nous disons. Our waitress. Watch her. She has no idea what we're saying. The men turned to look at Miriam. She felt their eyes on her like heat from an open flame. Permettez-moi de démontrer. Allow me to demonstrate. Harrison leaned back in his chair, swirling his water glass. Elle est probablement le produit d'une famille brisée. Un père absent. Un mère abandoned. Aucune education à parler de. Elle est probablement à peine fini le lycée. She is probably the product of a broken family, an absent father, a mother who gave up, no education to speak of. She probably barely finished high school. One of the men, younger than the others, shifted uncomfortably. Harrison, maybe we should just order. Patience. Harrison's eyes never left Miriam's face. Je veux voir combien de temps elle peut rester impassible. C'est un jeu que j'ai joué avec moi-même. Voir combien de temps il faut pour les briser. I want to see how long she can stay impassive. It's a game I play with myself, seeing how long it takes to break them. Miriam's hands tightened on her notepad. Her professional mask wavered for just a fraction of a second. Harrison saw it. His smile widened. Ah là, vous avez vu ça? Un éclair de quelque chose. Peut-être tu elle comprend plus qu'un any le pense. Ah, there. Did you see that? A flash of something. Perhaps she understands more than we think. Oh, peut-être tu elle est just fatiguée. Les gens comme elles sont toujours fatigues. C'est si qu'arrive quand on a reine asper. Or perhaps she is just tired. People like her are always tired. That is what happens when you have nothing to hope for. The meal lasted 2 hours. 2 hours of French commentary. 2 hours of speculation about her intelligence, her background, her worth. 2 hours of being treated like a specimen under glass. When Harrison finally left, dropping his usual 15% on the table, Miriam did not immediately clear the dishes. She stood beside table 12, staring at the crumpled napkins and empty glasses, trying to remember how to breathe. Chef Daniel found her there 10 minutes later. He had come out from the kitchen to check on something, and he stopped when he saw her frozen beside the empty table. Miriam. She did not respond. Miriam. His voice was firmer now. She blinked and looked at him. Chef Daniel was a large man, his arms thick from years of working over hot stoves, his expression usually stern, but right now his eyes were gentle. "Go to the back," he said quietly. "Take 15 minutes. I'll have someone cover your section." "I'm fine." "You are not fine, and that is okay, but you need to take a moment." He paused. "That man, I have seen him before. I have seen what he does to the servers in his section. You are not the first, and you will not be the last. Then why does he keep coming back?" Chef Daniel's jaw tightened. "Because he spends money. Because the owners look at the numbers, not the people. Because in places like this, money talks louder than dignity." He placed a hand on her shoulder briefly, then turned and walked back toward the kitchen. Miriam went to the storage room, closed the door behind her, and sat down on an overturned crate. The room smelled of dry goods and cleaning supplies. It was cramped and dark and completely private. She put her head in her hands and tried not to cry. 6 months ago, she had been writing a dissertation on French Romantic literature. She had been analyzing Chateaubriand's concept of exile, the pain of being separated from everything you know and love. She had been sitting in libraries and attending lectures and dreaming of a future where her work mattered. Now she sat in a storage room, hiding from a man who assumed she was too stupid to understand his insults. The irony would have been funny if it did not hurt so much. Have you ever felt trapped between who you are and who the world wants you to be? Have you ever wondered if the person you used to be still exists somewhere inside you? Miriam was about to discover that silence has limits, and when those limits are reached, everything changes. Keep watching to see what happens next. And if this story is speaking to you, make sure you are subscribed to The Timeless Tale. When Miriam finally left the storage room, her eyes were dry. She had rebuilt her walls, brick by brick, until the mask was back in place. She finished her shift. She took the bus home. She helped her father with his evening medication. She went to bed and stared at the ceiling until sleep finally came. The next morning, she got up and did it all again. That was the pattern. That was survival. But somewhere deep inside her, in a place she tried very hard to ignore, something was beginning to break. The breaking came 3 weeks later, on a Tuesday evening in late May. Harrison had been relentless. Every visit brought new cruelty, new French commentary, new ways to remind Miriam of her insignificance. He had developed a routine, a performance he refined each time he came to the Gilded Room. He would arrive with associates. He would wait until Miriam approached, and then he would begin. Sometimes the attacks were subtle. A murmured comment about her appearance, a speculation about her living situation, a casual observation that she seemed tired, worn down, defeated. Other times, the attacks were direct. He would look her in the eye while speaking French, watching for any flicker of comprehension. He would describe her in degrading terms to his companions, narrating her movements like she was an animal in a zoo. He would wonder aloud whether she had ever read a book, ever had an original thought, ever dreamed of anything beyond carrying plates from kitchen to table. Miriam absorbed it all. She had become expert at disappearing inside herself, retreating to a quiet place in her mind where the words could not reach her. She thought of Paris sometimes, during the worst moments, the narrow streets of the Latin Quarter, the smell of bread from the boulangerie on the corner, the sound of French being spoken not as a weapon but as a language of beauty, of connection, of shared humanity. But that night in late May, the quiet place failed her. Harrison had brought 3 associates, all men, all clearly subordinate to him. The conversation at the table was about a company Harrison was acquiring, something involving technology and intellectual property, and numbers that meant nothing to anyone outside their world. Miriam approached with water and menus, her movements automatic. "Ah, notre service préféré," Harrison said. switching to French the moment he saw her. Ah, our favorite waitress. Jamie demandait ceci, elle allait être là ce soir. Elle est devenue un partie essentielle de mon expérience culinaire. I was wondering if she would be here tonight. She has become an essential part of my dining experience. His associates shifted uncomfortably. One of them, a younger man with glasses, actually looked at Miriam with something approaching sympathy. Vous savez ce que j'admire chez elle? Harrison continued, swirling his water glass. You know what I admire about her? Sa resilience. Semaine après semaine, elle revient. Elle sourit. Elle sert. Elle any dit jamais rain. Her resilience. Week after week, she comes back. She smiles. She serves. She never says anything. C'est comme regard un animal que ne sait pas tuer est en cage. It is like watching an animal that does not know it is in a cage. Something cracked inside Miriam's chest. Elle pense probablement tu elle mérite mieux, Harrison said, leaning back in his chair. She probably thinks she deserves better. ILS pensant tu ci. Mais la vérité est, tu elle est exactement où elle devrait être. Au service de gens que comptent vraiment. They all think that. But the truth is she is exactly where she should be, serving people who actually matter. Miriam's hand trembled. The notepad shook visibly. She tried to steady herself, tried to find a quiet place, but it was gone. There was only the roaring in her ears and the tightness in her chest and the sudden terrifying certainty that she could not breathe. Regardes, Harrison said, his voice amused. Look, J.E. croy couon L.A. finale minutint. Il aura fallu de moi, mais J.E. croy couon void enfin quelques chose de real. I believe we have finally gotten to her. It took months, but I believe we are finally seeing something real. The room tilted. Miriam's vision narrowed to a tunnel. She heard herself say something, words that made no sense, and then she was walking away from the table. Walking too fast. Walking toward the kitchen. Walking toward anywhere that was not here. She made it to the service corridor before her knees gave out. The floor was cold against her palms. She knelt there, gasping for air that would not come. Her chest constricting like a fist was squeezing her heart. The edges of her vision sparkled with dark spots. She was going to pass out. She was going to collapse right here in the corridor, and everyone would see, and she would lose her job, and her father would lose his medication, and everything would fall apart. Miriam. Sophia's voice came from somewhere above her. Miriam, look at me. Look at me right now. Miriam raised her head. Sophia crouched beside her, one hand on Miriam's shoulder, her expression fierce and frightened. You're having a panic attack. It feels like you're dying, but you're not. You're gonna be okay. Just breathe with me. In through your nose. Out through your mouth. Slow. That's it. Just like that. They breathed together. In. Out. In. Out. Gradually, the tightness in Miriam's chest began to ease. The tunnel vision receded. The roaring in her ears faded to a distant hum. That's it, Sophia said. You're doing great. Just keep breathing. I can't, Miriam whispered. I can't do this anymore. I know. He says these things. Every time. And I just stand there. I let him. Because I need this job. Because I need the money. Because my father needs me. But I can't. I can't keep pretending I don't understand. I can't keep letting him treat me like I'm nothing. Sophia was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was gentle but firm. You understand French. It was not a question. Miriam nodded, tears streaming down her face. I studied in Paris. For 2 years, I was writing a dissertation on French literature. I understand every single word he says. Oh, honey. Sophia pulled her into a hug. Why didn't you tell anyone? Because what good would it do? He's a billionaire. He spends more money here in a month than I make in a year. If I complained, they would fire me. They would choose him over me. That's how it works. That's how you think it works. But you don't know until you try. Footsteps approached. Miriam looked up to see Chef Daniel standing at the end of the corridor, his expression unreadable. What happened? Panic attack, Sophia said. That Drake man finally broke her. Chef Daniel's jaw tightened. He looked at Miriam for a long moment, then turned and walked toward the dining room. Wait, Miriam called after him. "What are you doing?" He did not answer. He just kept walking. 5 minutes later, Marcus Brennan himself appeared in the corridor. The owner of the Gilded Room was a tall man in his 60s, silver-haired and sharp-eyed. He rarely interacted with the servers directly. His presence here, now, meant something significant was happening. "Miss Wells," he said, his voice formal but not unkind. "Chef Okonkwo has informed me of a situation with one of our regular customers." Miriam wiped her eyes and struggled to her feet. "Mr. Brennan, I apologize. I'll go back to work. I just needed a moment. That's not why I'm here." He studied her face. "The chef tells me that Harrison Drake has been verbally abusing you, in French, for months. Is that accurate?" Miriam hesitated. This was the moment she had feared. The moment where she had to choose between truth and survival. "Yes," she said finally. "It's accurate. And you understand French?" "Fluently. I studied at Yale. I spent 2 years in Paris." Something flickered in Mr. Brennan's expression. Surprise, perhaps, or reassessment. "Why didn't you report this?" "Because I need this job. Because I thought you would choose a customer who spends thousands of dollars over a server who makes minimum wage. Because that's how these things usually work." Mr. Brennan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was different, softer. "I built this restaurant over 30 years. I've made mistakes. I prioritize profit over people more times than I care to admit. But there are lines. And Mr. Drake has crossed one." He paused. "Wait here." He turned and walked toward the dining room. Miriam and Sophia exchanged glances. Neither spoke. The minutes stretched out, each one feeling like an hour. Then Mr. Brennan returned. His expression was grim, but satisfied. "Mr. Drake has been asked to leave and not return. I informed him that his behavior toward our staff is unacceptable and that the Gilded Room will no longer welcome his business." Miriam stared at him. "You banned him." "I did. But the money he spends, the bills he runs up. Some money isn't worth having." Mr. Brennan's voice was firm. "You are a valued employee, Miss Wells. More valued than any single customer, regardless of how much they spend. I should have paid closer attention. I apologize for failing to do so." He turned and walked back toward the front of the restaurant, leaving Miriam standing in the corridor with Sophia's hand on her shoulder. "You see," Sophia said quietly, "sometimes the world surprises you." The relief lasted 3 days. For 72 hours, Miriam worked her shifts without the shadow of Harrison Drake looming over table 12. She smiled at customers and meant it. She served meals without bracing for cruelty. She began to remember what it felt like to be treated like a human being, but the damage was already done. The panic attack had cracked something open inside her. All the words she had swallowed, all the insults she had absorbed, all the pieces of herself she had buried, they had not disappeared just because Harrison was gone. They were still there, heavy and sharp-edged, pressing against her chest. And then her father got worse. It happened gradually at first. Walter's tremors increased. His balance became less certain. He fell twice in 1 week, once in the bathroom and once in the kitchen. The second fall left a bruise on his hip that made Miriam's heart stop when she saw it. The doctor adjusted his medication again. More pills, higher doses, greater expense. "The disease is progressing," Dr. Patel said, her voice gentle but honest. "It's not unexpected, but it does mean we need to consider additional support. Physical therapy twice a week instead of once. Perhaps a part-time caregiver for when you're at work. I can't afford a caregiver. There are programs, sliding scale options. I can give you some referrals." Miriam took the referrals. She made the calls. Every option was either full, too expensive, or had a waiting list that stretched into the following year. So she picked up more shifts. Every available hour at the Gilded Room, doubles on weekends, lunch and dinner on weekdays. She stopped eating real meals, surviving on scraps from the kitchen and coffee that never seemed to be enough. Sophia noticed. Chef Daniel noticed. Even Mr. Brennan noticed, pulling her aside one evening to ask if everything was all right at home. "Fine," Miriam said, the word automatic by now. "Everything's fine. But everything was not fine. Her body was exhausted. Her mind was foggy. And somewhere beneath the surface, the cracks from her panic attack were still spreading. One night, after a particularly brutal double shift, Miriam came home to find her father waiting up for her. He sat in his armchair by the window, the lamp beside him casting warm light across his weathered face. "It's past midnight," she said, hanging up her coat. "You should be asleep." Couldn't sleep. Wanted to talk to my daughter. Something in his tone made her pause. She sat down on the couch across from him, suddenly aware of how tired she was. Her feet ached. Her back ached. Everything ached. "Dad, what's wrong?" "I should be asking you that." Walter's hands trembled in his lap, but his eyes were clear and focused. "You're working yourself to death, Miriam. I see it. You come home exhausted. You barely eat. You don't laugh anymore." "I'm fine." "Stop saying that. You're not fine. And I'm not fine watching you destroy yourself to take care of me." "Dad." "No, listen to me." His voice cracked, but he pushed through. "I've had a good life. A long life. I taught thousands of kids. I raised a daughter I'm incredibly proud of. If my time is coming to an end, then that's okay. That's how it's supposed to work. What's not okay is watching you give up everything. Your health, your future, your identity, just to squeeze a few more years out of a body that's already failing." Miriam's eyes burned with tears she refused to shed. "Don't talk like that. You're not dying." "We're all dying, sweetheart. Some of us just have a better idea of the timeline." Walter leaned forward, his trembling hand reaching for hers. "Do you remember what you used to be like? Before all this? Before you came home?" She did not answer. The memory was too painful. "You were brilliant," Walter continued. "Not just smart. Brilliant. You lit up when you talked about your research. You had this fire in you, this passion for ideas and language and meaning. I used to listen to you talk about French literature and think, my God, she's going to change the world. That was a long time ago. It was 15 months ago. That's not a long time. That's just a hard time." Walter squeezed her hand. "That person is still in you, Miriam. She's buried under all this weight you're carrying, but she's still there, and she deserves to come back." Miriam closed her eyes. The tears came anyway, streaming down her cheeks. "I don't know how," she whispered. "I don't know how to be her anymore." You start by remembering that she exists, by not letting the world convince you that you're nothing more than what you do for a living, by fighting for yourself the way you fight for me. They sat together in the lamplight, father and daughter, the silence between them full of everything they could not say. Outside, the city hummed with its endless noise. Inside, there was only love and grief and a fragile hope that things could still get better. Have you ever lost yourself so completely that you forgot who you used to be? Have you ever needed someone to remind you of your own worth? Miriam's journey is about to take an unexpected turn. Stay with the timeless tale to see what happens next. The Gilded Room felt different without Harrison Drake. For 2 weeks, Miriam worked her shifts without incident. The corner booth at table 12 was occupied by other customers now. Pleasant couples and business lunches, and nothing that left her feeling hollowed out. She began to relax, just slightly, began to believe that maybe, just maybe, the worst was behind her. Then came Saturday. The evening shift started normally. The dining room filled with weekend customers celebrating birthdays and anniversaries, and the simple pleasure of expensive food. Miriam moved through her section with practiced efficiency, her smile genuine for the first time in months. At 7:15, she was refilling water glasses at table 9 when she felt something shift in the atmosphere, a familiar coldness, a presence that made her skin prickle with warning. She looked toward the entrance. Harrison Drake stood at the hostess stand. Miriam's heart stopped. She watched as the weekend hostess, a college student named Amanda, who had only been working at the Gilded Room for 3 weeks, consulted her seating chart and smiled brightly at Harrison. Amanda did not know about the ban. She had not been there when Mr. Brennan had asked Harrison to leave. She had no idea who she was seating. Harrison followed Amanda across the dining room, his silver hair gleaming under the chandeliers. He was accompanied by 3 associates, all men, all wearing the same expression of casual entitlement that Miriam had come to recognize. They sat down at table 12, Harrison's usual table. In Miriam's section, Amanda returned to the hostess stand, oblivious. Miriam stood frozen by table 9, the water pitcher still in her hand, her pulse hammered in her ears. Every instinct screamed at her to find Mr. Brennan, to explain the situation, to have Harrison removed before anything could happen. But Mr. Brennan was not there. He had left early for a family obligation, leaving the restaurant in the hands of the night manager, a nervous young man named Kevin who had never dealt with anything more serious than a wine complaint. Miriam looked around the dining room. Sophia was working the other side of the restaurant, too far away to help. Chef Daniel was in the kitchen, focused on the dinner rush. She was alone. Harrison caught her eye across the room. He smiled, that same cold, satisfied smile she had come to know so well. He had come back on purpose. He had waited for a night when the senior staff was absent. He had timed this perfectly. For a long moment, Miriam considered her options. She could refuse to serve him. She could find Kevin and explain the situation. She could hide in the storage room until his table was reassigned to someone else. But something had changed inside her over the past 2 weeks. Something that her father's words had loosened. Something that the panic attack had cracked open. The woman she used to be, the scholar, the expert, the person who had spent years mastering the French language and its literature, that woman was stirring. And that woman was tired of hiding. Miriam set down the water pitcher. She smoothed her apron. She walked across the dining room toward table 12. Harrison watched her approach, his expression amused. He said something in French to his companions, too quietly for her to hear. They chuckled. "Good evening, gentlemen," Miriam said, her voice steady. "Welcome to the Gilded Room. May I start you with something to drink?" Harrison leaned back in his chair, his eyes glittering with anticipation. "Ah, notre vieille ami est retour," he said loudly. "Ah, our old friend is back. J'ai pensé qu'on elevate fate parter. Mais non, elle est là. Pris un new server comme toujours. I thought we had gotten rid of her. But no, here she is, ready to serve us as always." His associates exchanged glances. One of them, a heavy-set man with a beard, laughed nervously. "Elle me manque en fait," Harrison continued. "I actually missed her. Elle envoie rien de tel que devoir quelqu'un que any comprendrait pour vous rappeler à quel point vous êtes supérieur. There is nothing like having someone who understands nothing to remind you how superior you are." Miriam's hand tightened on her notepad. She felt a familiar tightness in her chest, the beginning of that spiral toward panic. But beneath it, something else was rising. Something hot and fierce and long overdue. "Regardez-la," Harrison said, gesturing at Miriam with his water glass. "Look at her. Tellement pathetique. Tellement désespérée. Elle est probablement passée tard de se via être invisible. Et-elle le sera pour le reste de ses jours. Serve de gens que any se souvienne jamais de son nom." So pathetic, so desperate. She has probably spent her whole life being invisible, and she will be for the rest of her days, serving people who will never remember her name. The words hung in the air like poison, and something inside Miriam simply refused to absorb them anymore. "Monsieur Drake," she said. Harrison's smile flickered. His associates went still. "Je comprends parfaitement le français," Miriam continued, her voice clear and strong. "I understand French perfectly. Je le parle couramment depuis l'âge de 20 ans j'ai étudié à Paris pendant 2 ans j'ai écrit un livre sur la littérature romantique française à Yale. J'ai presented articles dans de conferences à Lyon et à Genève. I have spoken it fluently since I was 20 years old. I studied in Paris for 2 years. I wrote a dissertation on French Romantic literature at Yale. I presented papers at conferences in Lyon and Geneva." Harrison's face went pale. His associates stared at her with expressions of shock and dawning horror. "Chaque mot que vous avez dit sur moi pendant 6 mois. Chaque insult, chaque moquerie, chaque speculation sur mon intelligence et ma valeur en tant qu'être humain. J'ai tout compris. Every word you have said about me for 6 months, every insult, every mockery, every speculation about my intelligence and worth as a human being, I understood all of it." The dining room had gone quiet. Other guests were watching, sensing that something significant was happening at table 12. G. Nai par pond pars que j'avais besoin de ce travail. Miriam continued. I did not respond because I needed this job. Mon Paris malade. Il a la maladie de Parkinson. Les medicaments que tend de milliers de dollars par mois. J'ai quit mon programme de doctorat pour me couper de Louis. J'ai pris ce travail parce que c'était le seul que m'a embauché immédiatement. My father is sick. He has Parkinson's disease. The medication costs thousands of dollars a month. I left my doctoral program to take care of him. I took this job because it was the only one that would hire me immediately. Harrison tried to speak, but Miriam was not finished. Vous m'avez traité comme si j'étais invisible. Comme si j'étais sans valeur. Comme si le fait de porter un tableau signified que G, and avise, and I servo, and I dignite, and I aim. You treated me as if I were invisible, as if I were worthless, as if wearing an apron meant I had no brain, no dignity, no soul. Mais la vérité est que je suis plus éduqué que quiconque à cette table. Je parle trois langues couramment. J'ai étudié dans certains de meilleurs institutions du monde. Et j'ai choisi d'être ici, de faire ce travail, parce que l'amour demande parfois du sacrifice. But the truth is that I am more educated than anyone at this table. I speak 3 languages fluently. I have studied at some of the finest institutions in the world. And I chose to be here to do this work because love sometimes demands sacrifice. She paused, letting the words settle. Vous, en revanche, avez choisi d'être cruel. You, on the other hand, have chosen to be cruel. Vous avez choisi de dégrader quelqu'un que vous pensez sans offense. Vous avez fait de ma souffrance votre divertissement. You chose to degrade someone you thought was defenseless. You made my suffering your entertainment. E.T. maintenant, tout le monde ici sait exactement quel genre de personne vous êtes. And now, everyone here knows exactly what kind of person you are. Harrison's face had gone from pale to flushed. His associates were staring at the table, unwilling to meet anyone's eyes. Around the dining room, other guests watched in silence, some with phones discreetly raised. G-N-A-I plus pair de vous, Miriam said, her voice dropping to something almost gentle. I am no longer afraid of you. Parce que vous en êtes reine. Vous êtes just un homme riche que besoin d'y cracer, les autres pour s'y sentir grand. Etc. genre de vide, any peut être rempli par aucune somme d'argent. Because you are nothing. You are just a wealthy man who needs to crush others to feel big. And that kind of emptiness cannot be filled with any amount of money. She removed her apron slowly, deliberately, folding it with the same care she had once used to fold the pages of her dissertation. Gee, quit ce restaurant maintenant, she said. I am leaving this restaurant now. Pas parce que vous m'avez chassé. Mais parce que j'ai refusé de rester dans un endroit de ma présence vous donne du pouvoir. Not because you have driven me out, but because I refuse to stay in a place where my presence gives you power. She placed the apron on the table in front of Harrison. Au revoir, Monsieur Drake. Goodbye, Mr. Drake. Then she turned and walked toward the door. The silence followed her across the dining room. She felt the eyes of every guest on her back, felt the weight of what she had just done settling around her shoulders. Her heart was pounding. Her hands were shaking, but she kept walking. At the hostess stand, Amanda stared at her with wide eyes. What just happened? Miriam did not answer. She pushed through the front door and stepped out into the May evening, the cool air hitting her face like a blessing. Behind her, through the glass, she could see Harrison Drake still sitting at table 12. He had not moved. His associates were gathering their things, mumbling excuses, preparing to flee the scene of his humiliation. And Harrison himself sat frozen, his face a mask of shock and something that might have been shame. Miriam turned away and walked down Newberry Street. She did not know where she was going. She did not know what would happen next. But for the first time in 6 months, she felt like herself again. The consequences came faster than Miriam expected. By the time she reached the bus stop, her phone was buzzing. Sophia, Chef Daniel. An unknown number that turned out to be Kevin, the night manager, sounding panicked and confused. She ignored them all. The bus ride home felt different than all the other bus rides. The city outside the window was the same, all lights and shadows, and people going about their lives. But Miriam was not the same. Something had shifted inside her. A weight lifted, a door opened. She had spoken. After 6 months of silence, she had finally used her voice. The apartment was dark when she arrived. Her father had gone to bed early, his medication making him drowsy. Miriam sat down on the couch without turning on the lights, letting the quiet settle around her. What had she done? She had quit her job, the job that paid for her father's medication, the job that kept the lights on and food in the refrigerator, the job that was the only thing standing between them and complete financial collapse. And she had done it publicly, dramatically, in front of a dining room full of witnesses. The panic should have been overwhelming. But instead, Miriam felt something unexpected. Peace. For 6 months, she had been disappearing. Piece by piece, insult by insult, she had been erasing herself to survive. She had become the empty shell that Harrison Drake accused her of being. Not because he was right, but because she had allowed his words to hollow her out. Tonight, she had filled herself back up. Her phone buzzed again. This time, she looked at the screen. A text from Sophia. "You were incredible. Everyone is talking about it. Call me when you can." Another text from Chef Daniel. "Well done. Your dinner is on me whenever you want it." And a third text from an unknown number. "Miss Wells, this is Marcus Brennan. I've been informed of what happened this evening. Please call me at your earliest convenience. We need to talk." Miriam stared at that last message for a long time. The next morning, she called Mr. Brennan. "I owe you an apology," he said before she could speak. "I should have taken stronger measures after the first incident. I should have ensured that Mr. Drake could never return. Instead, I left my staff vulnerable to his abuse." "I quit," Miriam said. "I understand if you're calling to confirm that. I'm not calling to confirm anything. I'm calling to offer you your job back, with a raise, and with my personal guarantee that nothing like this will ever happen again." Miriam was silent. "There's something else," Mr. Brennan continued. "One of the guests at the restaurant last night was a woman named Dr. Catherine Moore. She's a professor of French literature at Boston University. She heard everything you said. Everything. And she left her card with Kevin. She asked him to pass along a message." Mr. Brennan paused. "She wants to meet with you. She said something about a position in her department. An opening for someone with your qualifications." Miriam's heart stuttered. "I don't know what that means," Mr. Brennan said, "but I thought you should know. Whatever you decide about the restaurant, that door is open." The meeting with Dr. Moore happened 3 days later, in a small cafe near the Boston University campus. Catherine Moore was in her 60s, with silver hair and sharp eyes that reminded Miriam of her own academic mentors. She ordered tea and got straight to the point. "I teach a seminar on 19th century French literature," she said. "I've been looking for a teaching assistant for next semester, someone who can handle the material, engage with the students, bring fresh perspective to the text." "I haven't finished my dissertation," Miriam said. "I know. I called your former advisor at Yale. Professor Carstairs spoke very highly of you. She said you were one of the most promising scholars she had ever worked with." Dr. Moore took a sip of her tea. "She also said you left for family reasons, that your father is ill." "Yes. The position I'm offering is part-time, 15 hours a week. It would allow you to continue caring for your father while re-engaging with your academic work." Dr. Moore set down her cup. "It's not a faculty position. It's not a guarantee of anything beyond next semester, but it's a foot in the door. And more importantly, it's a reminder that you belong in this world." Miriam thought about her father, sitting in his armchair by the window. She thought about the dissertation waiting on her laptop. Page 247, 26 pages from completion. She thought about Harrison Drake, frozen in his chair while she walked away. "I would need to finish my dissertation," she said slowly. "Eventually, Yale would need to approve your return to the program. But I have connections there. If you complete the work, I can advocate for you." Dr. Moore smiled. You have talent, Miss Wells. Real talent. I heard it in every word you spoke to that horrible man. You understand language not just as a tool, but as a weapon, as art, as power. I didn't feel powerful for 6 months. No, but you found your power when it mattered. That's what counts. The door Dr. Moore offered was not a solution. It was an opening, a possibility. Miriam took it. The months that followed were not easy. Miriam returned to the Gilded Room, but only part-time. Mr. Brennan honored his promise of a raise and his guarantee of protection. Harrison Drake never returned. Word spread through Boston's elite circles about his humiliation, and his reputation had taken a hit that money could not repair. 3 times a week, Miriam took the train to Boston University. She led discussion sections on Chateaubriand and Hugo and Flaubert. She watched students discover the same beauty in language that had captivated her years ago. She remembered why she had chosen this path in the first place. In the evenings, after her father was settled and the apartment was quiet, she opened her laptop and wrote, page 248, page 249, page 250. The words came slowly at first, rusty from disuse. But gradually, they began to flow again. The dissertation that had felt impossible became possible. The dream that had been buried began to resurface. Her father's condition continued to decline, but not as rapidly as the doctors had feared. The new medication regimen helped. The physical therapy helped. And perhaps most importantly, seeing his daughter come back to life helped too. "You're different," Walter said one evening, watching Miriam grade papers at the kitchen table. "Different how?" "You're here again. Really here. Not just going through the motions." He smiled, his hands trembling against his coffee cup. "You're you again. I'm trying to be. That's all any of us can do, sweetheart. Try." The following spring, Miriam defended her dissertation. The committee at Yale approved her return to the program. Dr. Moore advocated. Professor Carstairs advocated. The work spoke for itself. 26 pages that had taken over a year to complete, but that completed something much larger than a degree. Walter could not travel to New Haven for the defense. But Miriam called him immediately afterward, standing outside the building where she had just become Dr. Miriam Wells. "I did it, Dad. I knew you would." His voice cracked with emotion. "I'm so proud of you. So incredibly proud. I couldn't have done it without you." "Yes, you could have. You always had it in you. I just reminded you to look." That evening, Miriam took the train back to Boston. She did not go to the apartment. Instead, she walked to Newbury Street, to the alley behind the Gilded Room, to the service entrance where her journey had begun 2 years earlier. She stood there for a long moment, remembering. The woman who had walked through that door had been desperate, broken, convinced that her dreams were over and her identity was lost. She had believed that survival meant erasure, that love meant sacrifice, that silence was the only option. That woman had been wrong. Survival mattered. Love mattered. Sacrifice mattered. But so did voice. So did truth. So did the courage to stand in front of someone who wanted to diminish you and say, "I am more than you think I am. I am more than you will ever understand." Miriam turned away from the Gilded Room and walked toward the bus stop. The city stretched out before her, full of lights and shadows and possibilities she was only beginning to imagine. Her father was waiting at home. Her laptop was waiting with research proposals and job applications. Her life was waiting. Not the life she had planned, but a life that was hers nonetheless. She had lost herself for a while, but she had found herself again. And sometimes that was enough. Sometimes that was everything. There's a moment in every person's life when they must choose between silence and speech, between the safety of invisibility and the risk of being seen, between the person the world wants them to be and the person they truly are. Miriam Wells made her choice in a crowded dining room, surrounded by crystal chandeliers and white tablecloths and people who assumed she had nothing worth saying. She proved them wrong, not because she needed to impress them, not because she wanted revenge, but because the woman she had been, the woman she still was, deserved to exist. If this story has moved you, if you have ever felt invisible or silenced or forgotten, remember this. Your voice matters. Your truth matters. And the world will never know who you are until you have the courage to tell it. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to The Timeless Tale for more stories that speak to the heart. And share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever found your voice when it mattered most? We would love to hear from you.